On the surface, this might have looked like just another Sonoma race that Martin Truex Jr. dominated, but if we look a little further, there are actually quite a few very interesting and very just feel-good storylines that go along with today's race. So we're going to talk about all of that and more this afternoon. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. It's good to be back after the off weekend. Just got done watching the Toyota Save Mart 350 at Sonoma, and boy, the Toyotas were the talk of the town. They were the show this afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit about the race itself, talk about some of the key storylines. I'm going to look at all the top finishers, run through a few of their days, and then I'm going to put this thing on the Groovy gauge, which it's been up and down in recent weeks, so it'll be interesting maybe to see where this one falls. But yeah, this was the last race of the season on the Fox family of networks. We move over to the NBC group of networks next week, and as a result, Darrell Waltrip, this was his final race as a NASCAR commentator. You saw several drivers, Stenhouse, DiBenedetto, David Reagan ran special throwback paint schemes for Darrell Waltrip. I thought they handled the broadcast perfectly this afternoon. We got to hear boogity 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 one last time, so that was great. I actually thought the commentary from Mike Joy, Darrell Waltrip, Jeff Gordon, I thought that was actually one of the best parts of this broadcast. I felt like they all really had something unique to offer, especially at a road course where the cars handled differently, where the racing looks different than it does most weekends. I thought they really added to the broadcast this weekend. So Darrell Waltrip, in my opinion, went out on a very high note. But yeah, let's talk about the racing on the track. This was the first Sonoma race since, I believe, 1998 to feature the carousel. We were running the full 2.5 mile configuration today. Really, I don't think any of these drivers had ever raced on it before. This is their first weekend tackling this new course. And if the Roval taught us anything last year, that when you introduce a new road course, things can get kind of crazy for some of these drivers. Had some spins in practice, some tire failures in qualifying, but when it actually came to the race on Sunday, these guys figured it out and kept it pretty clean. We did not see a single caution all race long, minus the 2 for stages, which I'll talk about stage racing and road courses here in just a minute. That isn't to say we didn't see contact. There were plenty of bent up fenders, front ends completely stuffed in. The second place finishing car didn't look like a Toyota at the end of this thing. It looked like something else. Kind of had like a Volkswagen Beetle looking front end. I'm talking about Kyle Busch. Yeah, it was messy. We saw contact, we saw spins, but most of them all single car spins, so we didn't have any full course yellows, minus the 2 stage breaks, and that resulted in, well, the second half of this race especially was a strategy-dependent race. We saw that come into play a little bit with our leaders, and as a result, while the top 2 were pretty close, third place was more than 30 seconds behind the leaders at the end of this thing. So it was, you know, if you're only a NASCAR fan, if you don't watch other motorsports, then this might have looked kind of different. It definitely had a different feel from most NASCAR races. I do want to talk about stage racing, though. I am a fan of stage racing. I know a lot of fans, since it was introduced a couple of years ago, have been kind of split on it. Some fans like it, some fans don't like it. I like stage racing. I like that it rewards consistency throughout the race. I also, at most tracks, do not mind the mandatory caution that it brings out. I think there's a lot of tracks, especially with the older aero packages, this one too, but especially at like mile and a halfs in years past, you know, when a mile and a half race went caution free, it just wasn't that entertaining to watch. And I know NASCAR, you know, it's a competition first, it's entertainment as well, but the entertainment factor really suffered before stage racing at some of those tracks. So I don't mind the cautions at most tracks. Road courses, and I've said this for a while now, road courses and I would say super speedways are the 2 exceptions. Road courses races, one of the things that makes them unique and special is that they're very strategy dependent, and when you break up those first 2 stages into small fuel segments where you can run the whole segment without pitting, you know, for fuel, that kind of takes away from a strategy element. We see this at Watkins Glen, we'll see this at the Roval also this year. The supposed reason NASCAR, you know, throws the caution at stage breaks is primarily so that TV, you know, Fox and NBC can cut to commercials and not, you know, eat into the green flag racing action. It's a free caution that allows them to get some commercials out of the way, and in theory that's a great idea, but at the end of the day, like in today's race, we saw in the first like 13 laps, we saw 3 different commercial breaks. I know laps take a long time at Sonoma, but in the first stage we saw 3 commercial breaks, and I thought that was a little much. If we're going to show that many commercials during the green flag racing, then what's really the caution for? Point is, I don't like the mandatory cautions at road courses or super speedways. I still like stage racing. In a perfect world, I'd like them to, you know, at the end of each stage, top 10 collect points, but the race stays green, so they just keep racing. They come across the line, tally it up right then, and the race keeps going on, and we know who had stage points. That would be the way I wish they could do it at road courses and super speedways, but I don't know if they'll ever change that. TV's, you know, Fox, NBC, they'll have to agree to it. It's tough. They got to satisfy all these different people, so I don't know what the right decision is, but as a result, the first half of this race, we saw a lot of short runs, 20 lap, not a lot of pit strategy. We saw pit strategy as in like people pitting before the caution comes out, but I don't like that type of pit strategy because you just have people, saying, I don't care about these points, I'll just try to go for the win, and it just kind of ruins the running order in my opinion. It's not real strategy. The second half of this race had a little bit more of your old school traditional strategy where people had to decide how early into the run, how late into the run they wanted to make their final pit stop, how would they want tires to work out in their favor, did they want to have fresh tires at the beginning or at the end. It was kind of that type of strategy. That strategy I enjoy. But ultimately the biggest problem with this race at Sonoma was a lack of passing. And now this has always kind of been the issue with Sonoma, and this is the issue with road courses across the world. On ovals, every lap there are 4 opportunities to pass a car. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and turn 4. Every single lap. At road courses, in Sonoma's case, there's 11 turns, technically. There's really only 2 turns that are really good for passing. So if you miss a guy in one turn, you gotta wait, 40 seconds, because a lap here is almost a minute and a half or whatever. You gotta wait like 40 seconds to really ever have another real chance at making that pass. And that's my problem with road course racing. Some people like it. It is a challenge. Driver skill comes through here more than probably at any other racetrack on the circuit. But as a result, it kind of causes races like we saw today. Not a lot of passing, definitely not a lot of passing up front. You'd see comers and goers, which is still fun to watch. Still more passing than I think you would see it, some other series on road courses. Now, it's hard for me to tell if the addition of the carousel made it easier or harder to pass. I really can't tell. I didn't hear any drivers complain about the aero package, so I don't think that really came into play. The speeds really aren't high enough at Sonoma for me to think that played a very big factor. But Sonoma, just historically, we don't see a lot of passing there because, like I said, there's only really 2 spots on the track you can pass cleanly, and that just made it tough. And especially with no cautions in the final stage of this thing, drivers were separated by several seconds pretty much throughout the field. And I don't know. I know passing doesn't mean it automatically makes it a good race, but I don't know, when you're just watching the same 10 cars parade by, same order, the same running order, lap after lap, it gets a little dry. I'll leave it at that for now. I'll talk about it again in a second when I go over the Groovy gauge, but before I go too long just rambling here, I want to look at the top finishers from today's race because this is where some of the most fun storylines really showed through. Martin Truex Jr. got the win. I haven't actually mentioned him yet, I don't think. I guess I did at the very beginning of the show, but Martin Truex Jr. got the win. What's that? That's his 4th win of the year. Ties his teammate Kyle Busch. They both have 4 wins apiece. Joe Gibbs Racing continues to dominate the NASCAR season. Joe Gibbs Racing now, I believe, has 10 wins combined as a team. I think Penske has 5 wins, so they have double the amount of wins as the next highest team. Joe Gibbs Racing is on fire. All 4 of their cars finished in the top 8 in this race, as well as Matt DiBenedetto, who's a JGR affiliate, running 4th. I'll talk about him in a second. Great day for Toyota. I know they're the name of the race. It was the Toyota Save Mart 350, but you got to look at Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch. Those 3 guys especially have always historically been good at Sonoma. Truex especially. He won this race last year, wins it again this year. It was interesting coming down the stretch with the way Truex pit earlier than Busch on that final sequence. Busch had fresher tires at the end, ran down Truex, looked like they were going to make it a nose-to-tail finish at the end of this thing, but final 10 laps, Kyle Busch kind of stalled out. It looked like Truex was just, he's just so consistent here. It doesn't matter the configuration. He is just so consistent here. Busch never really had an opportunity to make the pass for the lead, so Truex wins it. Kyle Busch second. It was still a somewhat enjoyable race, kind of anticlimactic because Busch never really got within more than a few car lengths away from Truex, so it was anticlimactic, but not unentertaining. Third place Ryan Blaney was a complete afterthought. Like I said, he finished more than 30 seconds behind the 2 leaders at the end of this thing, but a good day for him. One thing that I thought was very interesting was with the way this race was broken up with the stages, the first 20 laps and then the second 20 laps, we saw a lot of young guys running up front. We saw William Byron dominate stage 1, Kyle Larson was still up there in the top 5, Blaney, Chase Elliott, a few other young guys, Suarez, really looked good in the first half of this race, and I thought that was kind of surprising. I thought with the new configuration, I thought veteran drivers would be able to adjust quicker, but in the first half of this race, that was not the case. Second half of this race, the fact that it went long, it was a long green flag run. People had to learn how to conserve tires, be consistent for a long run. We saw a lot of the young drivers fade. I know some of them had pit issues, or Chase Elliott's case blew an engine, that's why you don't see him on this list, but you look here, at the end of the day, the guys at the top of this list, minus Blaney, you got veterans for the most part. But Ryan Blaney was one of the few exceptions. That's why I wanted to highlight him. He won the Roval last year, so we know he's a good road racer. This was big for him. It shows once again that Penske is just a little behind Joe Gibbs Racing, and it just every week, that's what we're seeing. Matt DiBenedetto finishes 4th, his best career finish, his first career top 5. This is quite remarkable. This is a remarkable story. You look at this top 10 here. Remember earlier this week I talked about how a few drivers could see their contracts coming to an end. Some of them might be on the hot seat. I mentioned mentioned Erik Jones. You see him finish in the top 10. I mentioned Aric Almirola. You see him finish in the top 10. I mentioned Clint Bowyer. And of course, I mentioned Matt DiBenedetto as all drivers who might need to find new contracts or sign new extensions. And they're all kind of on the hot seat. And they all came through and had very solid performances here at Sonoma this weekend, but no one shined brighter than Matt DiBenedetto in my opinion. He took a car that has no business sniffing the top 10 and drove it to a 4th place finish, sporting a cool Darrell Waltrip throwback scheme. The story was all about him. We don't think of Matt DiBenedetto as a great road racer or anything. Up until this point, his best career finish was at Bristol, so I thought, oh, maybe he's a short track guy, but a 4th place run at Sonoma should not go unnoticed. Huge props to him. That's big, especially coming after the announcement this week that his contract could be, the Levine Family Racing might not pick up his option. Finishes like this one are huge for him. I'll pick up the pace a little bit here. Denny Hamlin 5th, another Gibbs car with a good day. Kevin Harvick 6th, Stewart-Haas Racing still lagging just a little bit behind, but Harvick with a solid day, to say the least. Ryan Newman, another case of a veteran driver, kind of outperforming his equipment. That 6 car is not usually a top 10 car, but Ryan Newman, when the race got into that long run, the veterans showed bright, and yeah, Ryan Newman is one of those guys. Ryan Newman had a pretty solid, consistent, just overall day. 7th place is great for that 6 car. Erik Jones finishing 8th. He was actually contending for a top 5 until his pit crew had a slow pit stop. But Erik Jones, another guy that I could just mention, kind of on the hot seat. Not really a good road racer, but here he is finishing 8th. Great for him, especially given he started in the rear. Aric Almirola mentioned, top 10. Good run for him. Larson, this is actually his best ever finish at Sonoma. Coming into this race, he has never started worse than 5th at Sonoma in his career. In fact, 3 straight poles. He won the pole again today, or for today's race. But he never finished inside the top 10. He had 6 races technically, with top 5 starting positions, and he never finished inside the top 10. But here he finally got a decent finish. Still got to learn how to put a full race together here, but he can go fast. Clint Bowyer was my pick, but a loose wheel early on in this race kind of put him behind. He was able to kind of race his way back up into that top 10. He was sort of in contention, but was never quite fast enough. Jimmy Johnson actually ran up in the top 5, top 10 for a lot of the later stages of this race. Faded at the very end, though, to 12th. Still not a bad day. Actually, the highest finishing Hendrick driver, which is a little concerning. Kurt Busch, another solid day. Alex Bowman, pretty good. Someone told me on Twitter, I didn't hear him say it during the broadcast, but someone told me that Alex Bowman did not have power steering during this race. So if that's actually true, then kudos to him, finishing top 15 on a road course. Daniel Hemrick, who almost won the K&N race yesterday, solid 15th. Chris Buescher started in the top 10 for this race, 16th, another decent performance there. Daniel Suarez, his pit crew had an uncontrolled tire on the final pit stop. He managed to drive back up and still finish 17th. If not for that penalty, he likely had a top 5 day going, so that was disappointing to see. Brad Keselowski was a complete no-show in this race. William Byron, I mentioned him a minute ago, started 2nd, led pretty much the entirety of the first stage, won that stage as a matter of fact, but then just kind of faded once he got put back in traffic because of differing pit strategies. Like I said, it was so hard to pass at Sonoma. Even when you had a pretty good car, like I think Byron did, just couldn't do a whole lot with it, and ultimately kind of just muttered back in 19th. And then David Reagan, with that nice Darrell Waltrip tribute scheme, finishes 20th. Some other notables finishing outside the top 20. I already talked about Chase Elliott. He finished 37th, I believe. Blew an engine in stage 3, which was tough because he looked like he had a top 5 run going as well. Guy who won at Watkins Glen last season, so we know Chase Elliott can run these road courses. Shame to see that because Hendrick Motorsports has been still on a pretty good roll. Chase Elliott's been running pretty well the last several weeks, so hopefully this doesn't kill their momentum going forward. He's got some good tracks coming up. Chicagoland, I expect Chase Elliott to be good. Daytona, Hendrick cars are usually fast there, so hopefully Chase Elliott turns it around. Hopefully this doesn't turn into a slump of sorts. Stenhouse ended up 21st, Logano 23rd, some other notables there, but yeah, those are your finishing results for Sonoma earlier today. Very interesting. Yeah, a lot of the storylines came from some of our guys that finished a little further back in the field. So now let's move on, put this race on the Groovy gauge. Now I feel like I've been pretty positive and pretty upbeat during this video, but the truth is I really didn't enjoy watching this race at all. And I can't tell if it's because the racing actually wasn't fun. I can't tell if it's just because it was hard to pass or whatever, or if it was just because the guys I root for had issues. Like Erik Jones had a pit road issue that cost him a top 5, frustrated me. Daniel Suarez, I want him to do well because he qualified well, I know. I want him to do well, but they had a pit road issue, cost him a good finish. Chase Elliott blowing an engine had me in a bad mood. So I can't tell if that's why I didn't enjoy it or if the racing really just wasn't fun. I think it's a bit of both. I'll try to be as objective as I can, just focus on the racing, because the truth is, racing wasn't that entertaining. It wasn't that fun. Not much passing, and with the stages the way they are, not a whole lot of pitch strategy. Very fun to watch Matt DiBenedetto, kind of the underdog, come through and have a good finish. The finish between Truex and Kyle Busch was sort of intriguing, but like I said at the beginning, Busch never really got close enough to make it a real race. So overall, I did not enjoy this race very much. Now, a lot of people like road courses, and I do too. Road courses are fun. But of the 3 road courses we currently have on our schedule, Sonoma's always been my least favorite. It has great moments from time to time. 2016, the finish between Stewart and Hamlin, freaking amazing. But overall, Sonoma, just because there's not that many passing zones, the track is a lot slower, it's a lot more technical. The best drivers always show through. That's where we got Truex and Kyle Busch and guys like that up at the front of the field. So the best drivers always perform well, and I like that about this racetrack. But it's not always a super entertaining race. Always been my least favorite of the road courses, and today was kind of just another example of why. I got to give this race a 40% on the Groovy gauge. It just wasn't thrilling. It wasn't super enjoyable, honestly. I think if the stages didn't include cautions, that would have opened the door for some more interesting pit strategy, not the BS pit strategy where, oh, I'm just going to pit before the stage and gain all that track position back. That doesn't really count as strategy. I don't like that strategy. I mean, it's strategy. I shouldn't discount it as it's not strategy, but it's not enjoyable strategy. It's kind of just a gamble. There's no real method to it. If we got rid of the stage cautions, maybe I would have enjoyed this race a little bit more. It still felt overall, other than the stages, like a very pure NASCAR race. Again, the best drivers and the best cars rose to the top. Nobody else had a chance of beating Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. Their pit crews executed, drivers executed, and they battled it one-on-one at the end of this race the way it should be. So if you're a pure racing fan, if you just like it when the best cars and the best drivers are rewarded, which I do, this was an enjoyable race, but all the other stuff, I just like it when there's more options to pass, there's more strategy that comes into play. The race really didn't matter outside of the top 2. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 40%. I'm still optimistic for like Watkins Glen later this year. The Roval, I'm still very optimistic because I feel like those 2 tracks, at least historically, I feel like have produced better races consistently or more entertaining races consistently. But Sonoma, not a bad race. I just can't give it a positive score because, I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't that fun. But I'm sure on this one there's a lot of you guys that will disagree with me, but let me know what you guys think. This race just felt like a Martin Truex Jr. win. You know, Martin Truex Jr. is kind of known. He wins a lot of races, and it's not usually in thrilling fashion. I know he had a win earlier this year. I think it was Richmond. That was pretty exciting, but more often than not, when Truex wins a race, it's not super fun to watch. He just dominates, you know, so it felt like a Truex race, but let me know what you guys think. What would you guys give this race? What kind of score would y'all give it? I look forward to reading your responses. That, I believe, is going to do it for this episode of Out of the Groove. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the race earlier this afternoon, maybe a little more than I did, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll have some more episodes later this week. We might have to talk a little bit about the Truck Series race last night because a little birdie told me that good old Ross Chastain might have got his redemption. That was a fun race to watch last night, so I might talk about that a little bit in an episode maybe tomorrow. But for now, that's all I got. Thanks for watching, everyone. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Michael Harrison at G-Was of the Stars, Mentally Defective Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason Arlong, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Adam Lee, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Luscious, and the rest of these impressive, just absolutely stupendous Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this without you guys' support, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. But yeah, that's all I got. NBC takes over next week, so we're going to hear Dale Jr., Rick Allen, that whole group. Going to be fun. But again, we're going to miss Darrell Waltrip. At least I will miss Darrell Waltrip and his boogities. A true legend, a true kind of the voice of NASCAR for an entire generation. I told you guys this earlier last week. Darrell Waltrip took over the booth in 2001. I started watching around 2004, so for half the year, ever since I've been a fan, it's been the Darrell Waltrip, kind of taking over the broadcast, and it's going to be weird not hearing him next year, but I hope he has a great retirement, and I thought he called a great race today. So that's all I got. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Bye-bye.